Salutations, Imperial citizens and battle brothers. In order to please you, my ever-growing audience, I have streamed a list-building process for an Ultramarines Gladius before taking the list to a tournament. If you want the full detailed breakdown for everything in the list, check out the live stream, but I will recap some of the decisions going into this list once again. To summarize, we are playing a Gladius task force. That means we can select each of the 3 abilities once per game for our entire army to get. Advancing and charging, advancing and shooting, or falling back and doing both charging and shooting. Our list is built around one Roboute Guilliman. Many people believe I think Guilliman is bad, which is obviously not correct. I think playing him isn't free, and you need to build around him, however, which we did in this list. Anyway, Roboute Guilliman is our warlord and he is a melee monster. Guilliman hits really hard in combat and supports the army with 2 out of 3 of his auras. Your choices are +1 OC in leadership, a 1 command point discount to a stratagem within 12 inches, and putting down a second Oath of Moment if your first Oath target is destroyed. This last rule obviously makes use of the recent improvements to Oath of Moment, when regular Codex Space Marines got an additional +1 to wound against their Oath target. Double the targets, double the buffs essentially. For our list, this means we can include more Oath-reliant units than what we would normally take. Normally, I like to build lists with 1 Oath-reliant unit and a bunch of other units with innate rerolls or torrent weapons to make up for the fact that only 1 unit uses Oath. But with Guilliman, we can be a bit greedier. Second, I want to make use of our free stratagem ability by compounding this advantage with other rules that generate us and deny our opponents command points. Stratagems are powerful, and if we use more stratagems than our opponent, we have a big advantage. The first unit we have for this purpose is Uriel Ventress and a squad of company heroes. Uriel has a 12-inch aura in which every stratagem targeting an opponent unit costs an additional command point. He will be joining company heroes, a durable squad of 4-wound infantry space marines with a fancy collection of weapon profiles with a permanent -1 to wound effect. This squad will usually hang out with Guilliman and provide him with the Lone Up ability while making life harder for our opponent's stratagem economy. Uriel also gives 1 unit in our army Deep Strike, which I choose to put on 3 Eradicators. Eradicators are an anti-tank unit with built-in rerolls. By giving them Deep Strike, I can rapid ingress them for a walk into Melter range and deal serious damage. But they also do a good job with scaring your opponent and scoring objectives. The third piece of our command point puzzle is Marneus Calgar. We all know and love Marneus Calgar. He's the 2nd best fighter in the Codex and comes with 2 bodyguards, which on top of hitting hard in combat, also give you whatever squad they join a 4-up invulnerable save. Just by being in our army, Calgar provides an additional command point every single battle round. Marneus Calgar gives his unit permanent access to advance and charge, fallback and charge, and fallback to shoot and advance and shoot, which gives you some great flexibility. I attached Calgar to a unit of 10 heavy intercessors as a big extra wound battery. This squad of heavy intercessors is our first unit relying on Oath. Fresh out of the update, heavy intercessors went up in points significantly but with a notable buff. Their heavy bolt rifles are now damage 2. That means a unit of 10 has an output of 22 damage 2 shots, which at +1 to wound will even hurt tough vehicles thanks to the Storm of Fire stratagem, which allows them to hit most things to their invulnerable save while the Devastator Doctrine is active. Heavy intercessors are not the most damaging unit you can possibly take, but they are tougher to kill than Inceptors and Aggressors, not only due to their improved save against small arms fire or their extra 4 models. No, it is mostly because this unit has 30 inches of extra range. which means your opponent would have to focus on a durable brick of 10 models on the other side of the table, when more pressing threats are right in front of them. Speaking of threats, last but not least for the character slots, we have our captain in an assault intercessor squad, traveling around the board in an impulsor transport. You might remember this unit from our last Gladius video, and they are just as good as they were back then, possibly even better. Captains are allowed to use a reduced stratagem once per battle round, remember this for later, as well as a once per game ability to gain 3 extra attacks and the Devastating Wounds ability. Our captain carries the Honor Vehement enhancement, which grants the carrier extra strength and attacks, while the Advance and Charge doctrine is active for this unit. The unit in question being 5 regular assault intercessors. While not too threatening in their own right, they confer their innate reroll wounds ability to their captain, who greatly appreciates the rerolls to make the Devastating Wounds sing during the go turn. This setup frequently makes use of our combat stratagems. Honor the Chapter gives us a +1 to wound if we don't have Oath, and further increases our AP whenever we are in the Advance and Charge doctrine, which obviously synergizes with our enhancement. Then there is Only in Death does Duty End, an expensive stratagem which allows our unit to swing back if they die in melee and hadn't already fought yet. This is good if you were willing to trade this unit for an enemy asset and then took a second unit with you on your way out. This character and unit setup makes great use of their transporter, the Impulsor, which they can re-embark into with the squad tactics to be safe and secure after they killed something. The transport also does a great job as an extra scoring unit once emptied. Let us summarize the command point ability. Our character setup grants us 2 sources of discounted stratagems, 1 extra command point for Marneus Calgar, and thanks to Uriel, our opponents pay more for their stratagems. This means in an average given game, we should be able to use significantly more stratagems than our opponents. Don't be afraid to use your points on heroic interventions or to put units into different doctrines with Adeptus strategy. The occasional grenade or two can also do wonders. After the characters, we also have this regular intercessor squad. They got a really nice boost because in addition to their ability to make an objective marker held in their command phase sticky, they also get 2 extra shots per bolt rifle if all of them shoot into one single target. This change has turned them from one of the most anemic Space Marine status sheets into a legitimate skirmisher and gives them the ability to fight off other 5 model scoring units like Storm Boys or Warp Spiders. In this list, these guys were guarding my home field objective. Going back to much improved units, we have included a Reaver squad here. Reavers got a massive glow up with their knives going to AP 1 and their brand new aura reducing the OC of enemy units by 1. Why this unit is great, I will explain later in more detail. A bit of a side grade is my unit of Inceptors. They lost 3-inch deep strike and cannot come closer during rapid ingress, but they really like Oath of Moments +1 to wound rule on their twin-link guns. This unit was my main make things disappear unit. Oath something, deep strike 6 away and remove it from the board. This unit is really popular right now, but most people use the assault bolters to benefit from the sustained hits 2 on your rerolls. While that is certainly powerful, I instead went for Plasma Exterminators to have something capable of punching out a 2-up safe vehicle with lots of wounds. 1 unit of Scouts was included as the obligatory infiltrating screen. Getting turn 0 field presence is always useful and stops the enemy units from scouting closer to you. The final scoring piece of the list is an Assault Intercessor squad with jump packs. They round out the skirmish package and move fast to secure some of the more difficult to reach spots on turn 1 for secondary cards. I have in the past ragged on this unit for its unreliable mortal wound ability, but the new Oath of Moment really helps them to actually win fights with units in their weight class. Finally, we are running 1 singular Ballistus Dreadnought. This fellow is tough in our alibi anti-tank. Chances of this Dreadnought actually removing a vehicle with its shots are rather low. But it doesn't need Oath of Moment due to its inbuilt reroll ability, and it scares your opponent from deploying out in the open. One long-range gun is always better than 0 long-range guns. Now that we got the list out of the way, let's talk about the preparation for the tournament. The event was held at the Outer Rim tabletop shop in Tuttlingen, Germany. We got resources to look ahead of time. First is T3. This is the website we use over here to find and sign up for most tournaments before properly registering on BCP for the management of the actual event. On here, you can see the names of the players and factions submitted. While this is in no way binding to what you actually take to the event, it is still a pretty good indicator of what to expect. And what I saw was few Tyranids and no CSM. No Forge Fiends and only one person with triple exocrines is generally a good time for Gravis Space Marines. Second, we got the rules pack for the event, which included the terrain and missions. The entire tournament was played on a slightly modified version of Games Workshop Layout 2. The deployments Tipping Point, Search and Destroy, and Crucible of Battle. In all deployments, I saw that Gilliman can just walk into the center ruin and stay there. If I keep him just behind the Uriel and heroes, I have a very potent way to make sure approaching the center would be unhealthy for my opponent, while projecting the Supreme Strategist aura across most of the board. On the top, I can see a ruin, which is perfect for Marnius Calgar to start in. On turn 2, I can just advance onto the objective and fire down the long angle. On the bottom, we can see a perfect hidey hole for the Impulsor to set up in. Drive straight forward and threaten to throw your captain out to kill whatever tries the objective. This worked in 2 of the games, but for Search and Destroy I had to flip it, since I couldn't deploy the heavy intercessors in the building and use the Impulsor's movement to go up instead. The missions itself were very basic. Take and Hold, Linchpin, and Scorched Earth are all very simple missions, focused on holding objectives to score. These more or less play the same, with minor differences in how aggressive you have to play for a good score. What was pretty interesting was the mission rules, however. Keen viewers will have noticed my list running 3 battle line units. As we can see here, 2 of the 3 missions had the Raise Banners mission rule, which gives you an additional secondary point for ending a turn with battle line units on objectives. This has in practice allowed me to score 3 or 4 extra victory points respectively, which is basically the same thing as drawing an extra secondary card. So, as you can see, even outside factors heavily play into how a list is constructed, so I always keep an eye open. Let's get to the games at last. The first game was played against an opponent who I've known for a little while from different events. He even invited me to his awesome apartment alongside 6 other friends, and we almost held a little private RTT there. That was a lot of fun. He was playing Custodes, which was basically the Fulgur Piles list, winning the WCW, but dropping 1 Warden Brick for a Venetari squad. The game was overall a very simple back and forth. I went first and moved all my assets into position, using my heavy intercessors to hold the firing angle down the center line. The Custodes couldn't really set up into any reasonable forward spots, and instead had to stay back. With an advantage on the scoring, my opponent felt pressured to go in on turn 3, when this scenario occurred. On the bottom part, my Impulsor was targeted by an advancing Warden Brick, as well as the Ingress Custodian Guard. The plan was for both units to charge my Impulsor, kill it with the first round of attacks, and pile the second unit in to kill my disembarking intercessors. In order to prevent this, I decided to take all of my cells from the Custodian shooting into my invulnerable save of 5 up, in order to kill my transport faster. I would then disembark so that my opponent couldn't declare a charge with the Warden, since they were further than 12 inches away, and only gave the Custodian Guard a 10-inch charge, which they failed. I then managed to use my Inceptors to bait the Warden's Feel No Pain during shooting, before shooting instead into the Guard, while charging the Wardens with my Captain Squad. I used Honor the Chapter to bypass the -1 to wound, and used Epic Challenge in combination with Oath and Finest Hour to remove the Blade Champion from that squad. Thanks to the fallback in charge, the surviving 2 Wardens managed to kill my squad on the next turn, but I used Fight on Death to trade for them. On the other side of the board, after the Heavy Intercessors won their shootout against the Gladius tank over there, I charged my surviving 2 Reavers into my opponent's home objective with a lucky advance roll. My Reavers killed 2 out of 4 Prosecutors, thereby flipping the objective under my control, preventing Defense Stronghold. During the Battle Shock step, the Prosecutor failed due to the -1 modifier from the Reavers. That means the Venetari Custodians, instead of flying forward, now had to recapture the home objective and do so with ranged combat, because had the Venetari charged and failed their mandated Battle Shock, the Venetari would have been left with 0 OC, meaning Defense Stronghold and Storm Hostile would once again have been denied. Reavers are great, what can I say? The game ends rather decisively after the last Wardens got removed from the center, but due to the second player advantage, the Venetari managed to recapture the center for a final 15, making the score close for the finish. Ultramarines victory. In my second round, I was blessed by lucky circumstance. My opponent got paired into the winner's bracket due to an uneven number of players, and his army was unpainted. Nonetheless, I decided to treat this game with the utmost respect, because the matchup looked, to be transparent, very difficult. I was facing down the Angelic Host, a Blood Angels list focused on repositioning jump pack units every turn. 2 bricks of Sanguinary Guard, as well as a brick of Plasma Inceptors, function as very competent hammers against most of my units. Thankfully, I go second, meaning I take a lot of the pre-game pressure off of myself, since the repositioning units cannot swoop in for a late game point score. I make sure not to lose my home objective by bunkering down with my intercessors to both sticky and screen it. The heavy intercessors move right this time, and contest my opponent's expansion objective away while holding fire into the center. My opponent stayed back thanks to the threat of advance and charge, so I used my Inceptors to hit the Sanguinary Guard. They rolled lucky and survived with 2 models, but at that point they are weakened enough for me to ignore them. Dante's second unit ingressed for a charge into Calgar. I decided to go for the charge instead, however I failed the Dante mandated Battle Shock and got my bottom smacked. The Blood Angels cannot however handle my established board position, thanks to me avoiding charging anything relevant before turn 3, to shut down the Sanguinor from being an omnipresent threat. Dante and his squad end up holding that objective until the end of the game, but I use Gilliman for a final charge into the enemy home objective to deny the linchpin. Ultramarines victory. From a blessed game into a cursed confrontation, the Ultramarines find themselves face to face with the abhorrent traitors of the Thousand Suns. Do not be deceived by the amount of changes and adjustments the Thousand Suns have gone through. They are still mortally dangerous, and especially now, piloted by one of my clubmates. He's one of our best players, consistently going undefeated or close to. The army set up into position and I win the go first roll by going second. Let me explain. Scorched Earth is a great mission for the second player because holding on to 10 primary points per turn is very easy to do while exposing minimal assets. In addition, the player going second can usually get a free objective to burn. Going first, the Thousand Suns move behind most of the buildings to set up their sorceries, while Magnus decides to make use of the Cabal Point mechanic to jump into an angle to my Impulsor. A bunch of cultists move forward to score area denial and, in not then obvious terms, enable my victory. With Magnus away on one flank, I decide to go in with a bunch of my assets. I jump my opponent on turn 1. My enemy didn't expect this, which I assume is a thought extended to my audience and friends, who normally assume from my usually play pattern that I would be playing with a more defensive approach. I oath the cultists with the heavy intercessors and second oath the first 5 rubrics behind them. The jump pack intercessors and reavers move up to charge the center, while the now dismounted captain squad takes the far objective from the spawn while positioning themselves for a future play. I managed to kill the cultists, kill 5 rubrics guarding the exalted sorcerer and the spawn, handing my opponent a low score and setting me up for a follow-up punch with the company heroes behind the wall and my plasma inceptors. Ahriman leaves the wall, triggering my captain squad to reactive move to safety. Magnus double moves into position to see them, while the sorcerers use their psychic abilities to dismantle my skirmishing squads away from the ruin. I ingress my eradicators into the center to guarantee a 10, prompting Magnus to split targets, obliterating them, but letting the captain squad survive on 2 models. This seals the deal, only prompting one question. Do I throw the Plasma Scepters, Gilliman, the heroes, and the captain into Magnus, hoping to take him down? Or do I simply kill everything else, hoping Magnus cannot win the game by himself? I decide to go with the latter, and use all the described assets save for Gilliman to kill the Sorcerer squad, the Exalted Sorcerer, and the Vortex Infernal Master and his squad, while Calgar holds the ground. The Thousand Suns, incapable of using their remaining assets to flip the game stage, cannot recover and lose, giving me the 3-0 in addition to the satisfaction of defeating the Red Cyclops with Gilliman himself in one-on-one combat. Ultramarines victory. This list was amazing. It did exactly what I wanted it to do by putting Gilliman into a late game staging position, raising banners with my battle line for extra points, and tax the opponent's attention with my very capable heavy intercessor squad. I ended up going second in the event overall because I scored fewer points than the person coming in first, but undefeated is undefeated once again. I genuinely hope all my battle brothers enjoyed this little excursion and maybe prompt you to give my list a try. There are plenty of changes you could make to it. If you expect more damage checks to be present, you could switch Uriel and the heroes alongside the ballistas for 2 Vindicators. If you don't want to worry about long-range combat, give Calgar and a unit of aggressors a try. Little things like that. For me, this is the end of the Gladius for a short while as I move on to other detachments. I hope to see you again, tempered on the anvil of the battlefield. Courage and honor. Oh, before I forget, if you want me to read your list, and if you just want to tell me why heavy intercessors are actually bad, go and join the Realm of Ultramar Discord server, the best place for every fan of the Ultramarines to talk about how much we love our blue armor and toilet seat iconography.